The processor, I chose the AMD FX 8350. This is an octa-core processor clocked at 4 GHz and it's extremely easy to overclock. This is an 8-core processor and it's recommended for games that take use of the 8-core design. It's also useful if you plan on doing any video editing, as the extra cores can really boost performance in that area. The FX 8350 should run you about $170. Should you want to overclock, or you just want a better CPU cooler than the stock AMD cooler, I recommend the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. If you plan on overclocking at all, never use the stock cooler, because it can lead to extreme heat in your CPU and can damage your build. So using an aftermarket cooler will help run your PC cool and stable. If you don't plan on overclocking and you want this build to be a bit cheaper, you don't need to add this into your final purchase, but I'd put it in just so you can have that extra security. The Hyper 212 Evo runs in around $30. For a motherboard, I chose the Gigabyte GA990FX AUD3. This is an amazingly good motherboard for this build, as it comes with all the extras you will ever need in a motherboard. It has 4 RAM slots, which is useful if you ever want to add a bit more memory in the future, 8 USB 2 ports, 2 USB 3 ports, as well as a really well-made BIOS. It's overall an amazingly solid motherboard with a bunch of extras for around $120. For the graphics card, I chose the EVGA GeForce GTX 970. This 4GB monster run games like Far Cry 4, Dragon Age Inquisition, The Crew, and Civilization Beyond Earth at max settings at 1080p. Very rarely will you find a game that cannot be run on Ultra with this thing. This card will run you about $340. Memory is never a hard component to go with, so I just went with an 8GB stick of G.Skill Ripjaws X-Series DDR3 RAM. 8GB is plenty for your games and multitasking, and 16GB of RAM is kind of overkill, but it's possible to upgrade to if you really want to pay some more money. The price of RAM is about $70. SSDs are one of the best additions you can add to any build, because it can boot up your OS quicker, and you can store a few things that you want to run faster. Whether it's games, movies, music, or whatever media you want to store, an SSD will run it quick. For the SSD, I recommend using a 120GB Samsung 840 EVO. It offers great performance for an SSD, and it comes in around $70. Hard drives are pretty much the simplest components to pick, as they always stay the same. As a staple of my videos, I'm just going to go with the 1TB Western Digital Caviar Blue. The Caviar Blue is a very reliable hard drive. I've been using it for years with my builds, and the terabyte is plenty of space for your games, movies, media, just about anything you need to store. Now, the Caviar Blue and the Caviar Black, there's a small little caveat in which $20 more will get you a better speed if you want it. Unless you get a good deal for the Caviar Black, you can pick it, but if not, you'll be perfectly fine with the Blue. The Caviar Blue comes in around $60. Next up is the power supply, and as always, in my opinion, it's the most important part of any build, because you need power to actually run your system. My recommendation is never be cheap when you're picking out a power supply, because picking out a poor PSU can short out and catch your PC on fire. So pick a good quality supply over a good sale price. You're spending over $1,000 on this computer anyway, so picking a $20 PSU is probably not your best bet. My recommendation is a Corsair 600-watt power supply. 600 watts is plenty for this build, and it can also be used if you want to upgrade your build a little bit more in the future. It's also 80 plus bronze certified, which means it's a high quality power supply, and it can actually help you lower your power bill. It's also modular, so you can use it to take out any cables you don't need in the future. If you do plan on upgrading your graphics card though, it will take more power, but this PC should be able to run fine with this PSU. You can get it for around $60. Optical drives in PCs are quickly becoming outdated, unless you want a Blu-ray drive and you use CDs a lot. I've had my PC for years now, and I've only used the optical drive to install my OS and burn about 2 CDs. Personally, myself, I don't use CDs that much, but if you want to pick one out, it's perfectly up to you. Just in the sake of you installing an OS, I just went with a cheap yet reliable reader and burner, which is a Samsung. It's a simple basic drive, it runs you about $15. Finally, for this build is the case, and as always, this is where your personal opinion or general cheapness comes in. Computer cases can be up to the hundreds of dollars, which you're spending over $1,000 on the computer anyway, so maybe it's not that big of an issue for you. But just to keep this build cheaper, but still have a good bit of extras, I went with a Roswell R5. This is a quality, mid-tower case that has a simple design, and it holds all your parts together with some really good airflow. It's your build, so you can pick whatever you want in terms of a case. But if you just want a cheap, reliable one, you can get this case for about $60.